Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. I'm your resident active advocate, and I have a question for you. Who was the gliding gladiator? Not Hercules, because Hercules is a Greek hero. Gladiators are Roman. Thank you. I am a nerd, self-proclaimed. Today, I would like to talk to you about Disney's Hercules and racism. The racism present in this movie, just to dive right into it, has nothing to do with the movie proper, okay? It has to do with the characters who comprise the narration. The musical narration of this story is conducted by the Muses. There are fewer muses in this version than are in mythology. In mythology, it varies anywhere from 7 to 9 to 12. They could be the children of Zeus or the children of Apollo. But in the case of the movie, there's only 5. What strikes me as interesting about this movie is that I believe it was to give it more of a pseudo-religious feel because it has to do with the ancient stories of gods and heroes. They use gospel music as their narration style. They actually sing the narration of what's going on before you see what's going on in the movie itself. So the Muses basically sing about the creation of humanity by Zeus, which isn't how it happened in mythology. They sing about the Titanomachy, which was a great war between the older generation of gods, known as the Titans, and the younger generation of gods, known as the Olympians. Okay, so with the Titans, you would get gods like Kronos and Prometheus. With the younger generation of gods, you would get people like Zeus and Hades. All right, so the problem that I have with the Muses is that, well, they are among Disney's first animated Black characters, which is really cool, but that didn't really start until the early 90s. The problem I have with them as characters is that they are what you might call stereotypically Black. In modern media, although we are tending away from this, thankfully, in the media of the time, shall we say, so early 90s, late 80s in media, and before that as well, in media of the time, it was basically presumed that in order for other races, so non-white people, to fit into media itself, they had to do so on the terms dictated by white people. Disney was and still remains a company that is owned and run by white males predominantly, and their ethos does not stretch very far beyond the worldview set up by those white males. The problem with Hercules in particular is that while I really enjoy gospel music, I really do, and go and look up the old gospel singers and go and look up the old jazz singers. I'm talking people like Otis Redding, Ella Fitzgerald. Y'all know who these people are. Stevie Wonder, even a little later on, and Motown, all of Motown. You know who these people are, right? But the problem with the media of the time was that in order to fit into media at all, Black people, people of color just in general, had to do so on the terms dictated to them by white men, predominantly. So the Muses, while they are, as I say, among Disney's first Black animated characters, they are set up pretty much as Black female stereotypes of the time. You get the more chubby muse, shall we say, who is the very over-the-top and very obvious comedic relief of the movie. You know, it's like, the story of Hercules, oh honey, you mean Huncules, right? Because Hercules very good looking, I guess. You know, it sets up these sort of racial stereotypes where you can act this way if you look this way. You can sing this kind of music because you look this way. Gospel traditionally is seen as a, quote, Black genre of music. So amongst these, you would get gospel, jazz, and blues predominantly, okay? But those three are seen as sort of extensions of Black culture religions. So let's say the Black Baptist branch of religion down in the United States. But blues and jazz is an extension of blues. Blues, if you trace its roots way back, can almost be seen as an extension of the kind of music that slaves would sing in the fields. All right. I do know this much about, quote, Black genre music, that it was meant to express Black history as seen by the people themselves, but in an acceptable to white people kind of form. In the white attitude that dictated what Black people were permitted to do in media, it was, we want you to look this way, act this way, and sing this way. And above all, we put you in these boxes so that you are not threatening to us. You have this narrow box in which to operate. You cannot step outside of that box. And if you attempt to do so, you'll be canceled in mainstream media. So that is a good deal of the ethos surrounding Hercules in terms of the narration style. That and the fact that, as I say, these are among the first Black animated Disney characters. But the attitude towards Black people in Disney's media, much earlier than this, goes all the way back to a movie I did not discuss called Song of the South. You will not find this on Disney Plus, for one thing. It is permanently locked away in the vault because even by the standards of its own time, it was considered at least slightly racist. I've seen various analyses of this movie. I've never seen the movie itself, but it's not ridiculously racist, okay? It's not that bad. It's bad, but it's not that bad. The problem I have with Song of the South in particular is that Uncle Remus, who is more or less the main character, he may as well be considered the main character. He's a font of Black folk culture, but he's also portrayed as not a slave, right? He lives on this plantation and takes care of these white children, but he's definitely not a slave, and he's definitely not an ex-slave. Okay? Wink. I'm being way too obvious about this. I've been told by my lovely consultant to stop saying quote before I do quotation marks. Y'all can tell by the tone of my voice. I don't care how blind you are anyway. You can tell when I'm being sarcastic. So the built-in DVS describe video is not exactly necessary. So yeah, Uncle Remus is not a slave, and he lives on a plantation and takes care of white children and is portrayed as among the happiest, jolliest, most stereotypically Black character in all of Disney media. I'm sorry about the pop-ups if you can hear those, by the way. But that whole idea sort of translates into Hercules, not to such a great extent. Uncle Remus is portrayed as being jolly and carefree and very good with children, of course. And that is to make Black people as a whole in media look unthreatening. The whole problem with hierarchy is that when people are permitted to step in on it in any way, and especially in such a visible form as modern media, they still have to fit where they, quote, belong. Sorry, I said quotes again. But they still have to fit where they're meant to fit, right? And in order to do that, they have to be made to look, sound, act, and feel a certain way to the audience, who is, by the way, presumed to be part of the white majority. This is white media produced for white people to the extent that whiteness remains the dominant. When this is done through Hercules, therefore, the gospel music format, as I say, it provides a more religious kind of ethos for this great story about gods and heroes from the ancient past. The original story, though, is not quite as noble, shall we say, or as child friendly as portrayed in the movie. Um, Zeus was a bit of a player on the field, and when I say a bit, I mean probably 50% of Greeks in the mythology would have had some Zeus DNA in them. So, yeah, you don't want to see Hercules' noble beginnings as Zeus, once again, cheating on his wife. The movie is supposed to be made in a kind of religious way because, like I say, this is sort of the ancient origins, even of Christianity to a certain extent. The name Zeus is related to the Romance language words for God. So, like Dios, Deus, Dio, what's French again? Dieu, right? They're all related to Zeus, and the conlang goes on throughout the line. Zeus himself is meant to be sort of a precursor to the Christian god because he's, the sky father. Zeus is king of the skies. And the vaulted religious music style of this movie is meant to portray that this is a good god, even though in the original myth, I encourage you to read the original myth, he was not, it just was not. None of the Greek gods were particularly moral, except maybe Hermes and Dionysus. They weren't that bad, compared to the rest. Hades, however, is the one who gets royally screwed over because in mythology, again, he was one of the gods who was actually not that bad. But we're talking about racism, so I'm going to stick to that. In this movie, as I say, very stereotypical portrayals of the black characters who narrate the movie. And that is done for very specific and political reasons. This may be a movie for kids, but even in children's media, these things have to be present in order to sort of, I don't want to use the word indoctrinate, but to teach white children of white audiences the differences between their race and other races, because anything that is not us is other. However, you could flip that narrative and say, from literally any perspective, anything that is not us is other. However, with the hierarchy being what it is, anything that is not other is automatically, anything that is other is automatically bad, and therefore must be made to look good or digestible in its difference, in order to be seen as not a threat to the majority culture of the hierarchy, as dictated by the hierarchy itself. Because for a very long time, the hierarchy has been out of the control of the people who made it. So, thankfully, with the developing media standards, in later Disney films, you do see a much better portrayal of non-white characters. And I want to talk about that in Princess and the Frog in particular, but that's a long ways down the line. We have a long way to go before we get there. Can I just point out the fact, by the way, that in Hunchback of Notre Dame, Esmeralda is black. She is, she's portrayed as black, and she is one of the most morally pure princesses, or, just female characters in general, in all of Disney media. So that's a step in the right direction, even if you got the ethnicity of actual gypsies wrong. Yeah, so that's my piece on that. And I literally wrote down the next 3 movies in line, and the first one was Hercules. I automatically forgot the other 2, but I will check my list and have another video up for y'all tomorrow. Maybe actually about disability again, but if these things concern other issues, I'm going to talk about the other issues because I am not a one-issue advocate. Thank you very much. All right, so I will see y'all tomorrow. Hopefully the weather will be a little nicer. It's pissing rain. All right, have a lovely, wonderful day, and hopefully the sun is shining wherever you are. Mwah!